The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GALA webinar series. My name is Manuela Noske, and I'm the Communications Manager at GALA. GALA is a global non-profit trade association that enables communication and business across languages and cultures. We are headquartered in Seattle, Washington, in the United States. And today, Aline Müller and Maik Mehlhose are going to talk to us about games as a service, or how games as a service affect localization processes. And this webinar is kindly sponsored by Wordbee. Before we get to our topic, I need to go over our housekeeping items. Everyone's lines are muted to cut down on any noise. If you have any technical difficulties, let me know by using your chat box, and I will work with you to troubleshoot them. If you have a slow internet connection, your audio may be disrupted. If that happens, use the number that is listed on the GoToWebinar panel to call in with your phone. We are making a recording of this presentation, and you will be able to find it following the presentation on GALA's global website. All participants will receive a link by email. If you have any questions or comments, please type them into your chat box throughout the webinar. We will try to get to as many questions as we can with the time remaining at the end of the webinar. Next, let me introduce our speakers. Maik Mehlhose is the head of translation at WordCraft, a comprehensive language service provider specializing in localization solutions architecture, corporate training, text and audiovisual translations, brand language and terminology management, as well as text analysis. While completing his MA in Special Translation for the Arabic-German pair and Arabic Studies at the University of Leipzig and Ain Shams University in Cairo, he became interested in translation workflows, CAT tools, and translation project management. In 2017, he joined WordCraft and is currently responsible for the management of translation projects and the creation of translation workflows. In partnership with Wordbee, Maik is responsible for customer consultations, especially for gaming companies, and developing audiovisual training materials. Aline Müller is collaborating with Wordbee to strengthen their business development within the German-speaking market and the gaming industry. She is an experienced leader, certified localization professional, and organizational consultant who has over a decade of experience in online media and digital entertainment industry, with 6 years spent leading Kabam's localization strategy. She was highly involved in Kabam's international expansion and was one of the driving forces in the decision to build a dedicated localization organization to support worldwide game development. She's building on this experience, consulting companies in streamlining their localization strategy and building resilient organizations. And now, without any further ado, Maik and Aline, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Manuela, for having us, and welcome to our webinar about games as a service. At first, a small introduction for those of you who don't know Wordbee. So Wordbee is a translation management tool system that is also very effective in game localization. And yeah, we have users in 174 countries, and over the last 12 years have also accumulated some experience, especially also in the gaming sector. So as the first little test, we would like to know who's here today, like what kind of users and stakeholders. So we prepared a little poll, and yeah, just want to see who's there.
So the poll is open and people are actively putting in their responses. We're collecting them. And we have a lot of people on the call today, so I'll give it another 5 seconds. Okay, and I'm going to close the poll and share the results. So we have 16% of the audience saying they are gaming developers or publishers. 39% are working for LSPs. 16% for localization consulting, and 30% other.
Well,
Yeah,
seems to be a
that's
very
crazy.
good mix.
That's great.
So yeah, thanks for the insights. Then let's just start with the webinar about the games as a service. So as a first step, of course, what is games as a service? It's first and foremost an operating model, and the aim of that is to generate a continuous stream of revenue for developer and publishing studios. So instead of just going away from the one-off purchase of games, so a customer is just buying something in a store and then maybe a DLC 1 or 2 years later, it aims to on a constant release of new content over a long period of time. So engaging the players to keep playing and also to add new content to make everything a little bit more interested. Right now, it's a very widespread business model in the gaming industries with different monetization options that, of course, all have their pros and cons. And to understand games as a service a little bit better, of course, we have to have a look at those monetization options. We have 2 or 3 that I would consider are like more classic monetization models from the early 2000s, and 2 that have come up recently, like approximately 2017, and we just want to have a quick look over those because they basically embody the biggest ones that are currently in use. So the first one, the microtransactions, is one of the classic models, and most of the times you have a base game that is for free, or you have a game that is relatively cheap but offers new content through microtransactions. So you pay a little bit extra, like a couple of cents or dollars, to get extra items, equipment, lives, reduced cooldown time for certain modifiers, or you can buy keys for loot boxes that will give you additional skins or other prizes that you can use in the game. So we have different models, for instance, the freemium or the pay-to-win model, which means that you can get the game for free and also play it for free, but to really progress and make quick successes, you will have to put a little bit extra into the game. And this kind of monetization is one of the bigger ones and more successful ones on the industry. It's widely used in mobile games where you can buy additional features, and it's very lucrative for the publishers and developers. Of course, there are also some disadvantages connected to them. So some of the pay-to-win games are criticized by the gamers or by the press, has kind of a negative prestige every now and again. And in some countries, some versions of the microtransactions are also regulated by gambling law. For instance, the keys for the loot boxes are subject to gambling laws in Belgium, for instance, or different regulations in other countries. So of course, that also is a little problem for the localization of those games, because they have to always adapt to the to those regulations additionally to the other regulations that apply for the game localization. The second one are the game subscriptions and season passes. Those go to the directions that we already discussed with the GaaS. So you have a regular payment to play a certain game. So the game subscription basically doesn't have a defined end, so you just pay for the game as long as you play it, whereas the season pass gives you access to new content for a game over a certain period of time. So let's say for half a year, for a year, or for a gaming season, however it is defined. Of course, if you pay for a game over a longer period of time, you also expect new game content for that specific game. So you expect DLC, story packs, new skins, maps, units, items, or the so-called or the loot boxes we already talked about. Of course, that requires a constant development, a high planning like of the release cycles, and but it also increases the lifespan for titles. So if we look at one of the more common or famous game subscriptions we all think of World of Warcraft, that has been around since 2004 and is now in its 16th year of existence, and still has a huge base of gamers that still play it. So it already goes away from this one-off buy model that is classically on the market. So the newer monetization models, like the game subscription services, go one step further. So instead of just subscribing to a single game, you subscribe to a whole platform of games. So you have a monthly payment and you get games that you can play. And how Forbes phrased it, it's basically a Netflix for video games. And like Netflix, the consumers, so the players in this case, they expect new content, new games on a constant basis when they pay on a regular basis as well. So the basic idea behind this system is, of course, that people try out new games and they pay for the package anyway. So you don't have to buy a game for 60 euros, and if you don't like it, then you end up with a game, or you paid for a game that you will never play again. So you can attract gamers, let them try out your games, and it's all included in the subscription. And better performing games, of course, increase the revenue stream for the corresponding publishers or developers. Some development studios already considered to also make their own subscription platforms. So only their games of a certain publisher, of a certain developer will be on the platform. And of course, for them, it offers a lot of interesting subscription models that are behind it. So you can have different pricing and add additional incentives for the game. Like you can have a package with additional original soundtracks. You can get cheaper access to player conferences, maybe early access to the games or beta tests for downloadable content, and maybe even have players contribute to wish lists to what to fix or what additional features to include. And in that way also empower users to have a bigger influence on the development of the games. Of course, there are a lot of pros. First of all, of course, for the development studios, because like they get regular payments, so they have a plannable income stream. So they know how many gamers they have, how many people subscribe, and they more or less have a constant revenue stream. And it doesn't matter in which part of the year they are, they will always have a certain finances that they can count on. Of course, this model will also increase the lifespan of games, because if you release new content on a constant basis, then the lifespan of your game increases. And to maintain games, you always have to include the players. So they will send requests, and in collaboration with the players, you can enhance the overall gameplay of your games, and in that way make it more attractive. And another big thing, of course, is that new entries always divide your player base. So if you have the first part of your video game, you attract a certain player base. If you publish the second one, of course, part of that player base will go to your to the follow-up title, and every part that you release then on will divide your player base further. So, but still, you have to support the whole structure of every game that is out there. And if you simply increase the lifespan of your game, of course, you can enhance the game to the player's needs, and also have a very loyal customer base that will play your games even longer. So this, of course, this bigger interaction between publishers, developers, and the consumer is also a big plus to enhance brand loyalty in the end. So the last model I would like to introduce real quick is the cloud gaming. This is one step further. So you still have the platform that we were talking about in the game subscription services, but instead of downloading the game and just getting access to a database where you can download the game on your own computer and play it there. Cloud gaming is a service that allows players to play games on any device, so without requiring any special hardware or any local copy of the game. So there are different streaming models that I don't want to get into detail right now, but there are a lot of implications that these new models will open up. So, of course, the first thing that comes into mind is that we need more content for the games. So the people who subscribe, they expect more content for individual games, or just more games as content, especially in connection with the cloud gaming, where they can try out new things, notwithstanding what kind of hardware they have. So we have a rising amount of games in development, a continuous creation of content. And of course, this content needs to be updated constantly. So we have small updates that need to be integrated. We also have a bigger target group, because now we have a lot more casual gamers that will actually consider paying the money for a subscription service and then being able to try out different game and get stuck with the ones they really like. And for that, in the case of cloud gaming, they don't need high quality hardware. So they can try out new games without paying the expensive hardware, without paying for the computer game itself. And if it's not fun, they can just go on to the next game they like. So we will, like cloud gaming and game subscription services, will probably attract more casual gamers and heavily increase the number of users. And those increased number of users will, of course, lead to new gamer profiles. So people with different needs, different games that they have in mind. And there's also something where the creativity of the whole gaming industry comes or will be challenged. So with those implications in mind, we also have to see there are different business models that we can pursue. So in order to have a constant stream of content, we can go two ways. We can have few games with a high lifespan on the platform, or we can have a big library. And this is exactly what we can see, for instance, for the new consoles that come out in Q4 2020. So we have the Xbox Series X that already announced that they will have a smaller library, but will focus on games with a high lifespan, whereas the PlayStation 5's marketing claim is basically about the biggest library that they offer. So they have the biggest library and the biggest amount of games. So what does this mean in terms of localization? Of course, with constant updates and also like the provision of new games on a constant basis, maybe even smaller games that you need to fill your platform, you need fast turnaround times for wider variety of assets. So at first, of course, we have all the programming that is involved, but apart from that, we have new dialogues that need to be written and translated. We have different strings and items that will be added to the game. And also we will have certain voiceovers that we suddenly need the same speaker, maybe like for the main game, just that we have another side quest, for instance, that we need the same speaker for, but only for like 4 lines or something. So in that way, we have a huge variety of assets that need to be translated in a very efficient way or localized. And also if we look at skins or the adherence to legal regulations that we need to take care of, as we are in a highly culturalized environment. So we have to see that all of our updates and the content we create will also be easily localizable to the different cultures. Then of course we have to see that there are seasonal updates. So we have Christmas specials, Halloween specials, for instance, and of course those different content that will be available also needs to be adapted to the corresponding audience. Of course, we will always have the issue that there will be small bug fixes or small changes that will be needed and be fixed or implemented daily. So we will have daily updates, very low volume, but into many languages or into the languages the game exists in. And also the amount of languages could change with the new games as a service models, because for those new models, it's all about new gamers trying out new games also for different markets. And with the statistics gained thereof, we can also see that some gaming companies might want to consider adding new target languages to their products, or like maybe for sequels or new parts of a video game, and also see a rise of the languages that we will need localization for. So when we have an ever-changing product, of course, with large volume of previously translated content, we need to make sure that our developers and our staff always have all the assets at their fingertips, because if your game goes on for like 15 years, you always have to keep in mind that also people are leaving the company, certain suppliers will not be available maybe for a continuous project like this. And in that way, we all need a good management, in the sense that we can have a long-term success for the different projects we are working on, so the games. And of course, we have just a very limited time for QA, or no time for the QA at all. So we need to make sure that the content that we create, and also the translations and localization, is basically ready with a very or with a process that is not very error prone in that way. What we also should not forget with this rising amount of dynamic in the content is that we will see an increasing player development interaction that, of course, also affects the social media activities of a company, also in a localized and international way. And in the end, we also will see a rise in marketing, and which also needs to cover the seasonal demands and the different release cycles or faster release cycles that are an effect of this trend. So now we have a basic idea about what game as a service is about, and what kind of challenges the localization industry is faced with, especially in the current trend, because like the trend is just beginning, especially for the newer subscription services. But the gaming industry is a very dynamic industry, so we will see fast changes in the future. And what this means for the translation localization departments of this world will now explain my colleague Aline.
Thank you, Mike. Just to make sure that you're all still following us, we have prepared a second poll. This may not be applicable to everyone, but if I remember the numbers right, about 50%. So yeah, just let us know how you rate your game localization process. From couldn't be any better to process, what do you mean?
All right, and the poll is open. It took a moment to get distributed. Some slowdown in the system here, but people are voting. And we're going to give this another 10 seconds. And we're beginning to stabilize. So just a few more moments and then I will close it. All right, closing the poll, and I'm going to share the results with you. So how do you rate your game localization processes? Well, it couldn't be any better. Nobody had that response.
That's not surprising. You can always improve.
Yes. 44% are saying we get it right most of the time. 22% say they're documented somewhere, I think. And 34% are honestly saying process. What do you mean?
Good. So that's interesting, and it's great to see, because it means that you probably all can take little bits and pieces out of the presentation here and there. So that's good to know for us. So when we're talking about or talking with localization departments, specifically in the gaming industry, but also in many, if not all, other industries. One of the main issues or complaints is that localization is almost an afterthought. And as a result, many localization issues arise at the end of the project, shortly before the launch. It stresses everyone out, and it can also make the localization team look like they are the ones that weren't able to meet deadlines or perform a high quality job. And that honestly is a position that nobody wants to be in. And if you haven't been in that position, you can believe me, because I have, and it's not nice. And there's basically only one way to fix that, and it means that localization needs to step out of the shadow and take responsibility for what they do, but not only for their core job, which in the eyes of most would be translating, but also for the localized product, in our case, the game. And that responsibility starts a lot earlier than many people would think, and it basically never ends, especially when we're looking at games as a service. Because as long as the product is alive, localization needs to step up and needs to be in the driver's seat of any localization project, really. And that means that we need to be informed from the get-go, we need to be involved in all the areas of the project, and most importantly, we also need to be in charge. How that looks and works in reality, that can have many shapes and forms. It depends on the organization, the structure of your team, the culture in your company, and obviously also on the type of the games, the volumes, and the content you're working on. So unfortunately, or maybe also fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, there is no one solution that fits all. There is not a checklist that will give you the foolproof solution. There's going to be some trial and error and many learnings to be had on the way, and you will have to assess the solutions for yourself. But there is many best practices that can be followed. Some of them will apply to your organization, some may not. Some are pretty much mandatory to follow, and others might be just a nice to have for your case or simply not required. On the next slides, we look in a little bit more detail how localization can position itself within game development, which areas you should look at and think about when adding continuous localization to your service model as well. So you have to be informed. And you have to be informed as early as you can and as much as possible. You need to know what's coming your way so that you can plan. You need to plan your resources. You may need to contract or hire more. You may need to add new languages. You need to take into account your general workload, and you need to plan your capacity. So knowledge really is the key for your success at any time. And with knowledge in this sense, besides obviously your expertise as a localization specialist, I simply mean that you need to know what's going on, and you need to know the people in your company that can and will give you the information that you need. So basically, you need to be connected. And you should look for allies. There's for sure at least one other team in your company that needs similar information, if not exactly the same information as you do. So join forces with them and support each other. Again, how this looks in reality can be very diverse. If you don't know, find out who the right people in your company are that you need to talk to. So it might be the game developers directly, maybe there's game writers that might be a good alliance for you, project managers on the game team, or maybe there's a shared project team that works with the different departments. Whoever that might be, those are the people that you need to talk to, and you need to know them. And find ways how they can provide you with information that you need. Maybe they have a meeting that you can join or documentation that they can share. But be aware that if this is something new that you're planning to set up, you need to be prepared for a little bit of pushback at the beginning. Depending on the information and communication culture in your organization and also the level of transparency, your counterparts may not be too open right at the beginning. They may just feel like you are trying to intrude in their little area, in their little kingdom, and they may not want to share. So it's super important that you explain what you need and also why you need it, because that makes a huge difference. And also remember that you have a common interest with them, and that interest is a successful multilingual product that translates into earning a lot of money everywhere in the world. In order to achieve that goal, you have expertise and knowledge that you can share that will make the process easier for everyone and also helps avoiding mistakes. And these mistakes sometimes can be really expensive. And ultimately, you can help them to make the product more accessible to players. And as a result, they play more, they pay more, they get hooked on the game, and the company earns a lot of money. And then everyone is happy. That's how it usually works. And you need to remember that you can play a really important part in that. So don't hide anywhere in the corner. Step out in the spotlight and show them what you know. On the next slide, we look at how we can be involved. So now you're very well connected within your company. You have all the info you need, and this is now your time to share knowledge and help to avoid mistakes. For everyone in localization, some things just seem to be common sense, but honestly, they're not that clear for everyone else, and they may not be that clear for your developers. So just when we look at internationalization, a few examples. Text can just never be hard-coded in images or anywhere in your game. You need to be able to extract every written word to make it localizable. Seems super clear and makes a lot of sense. However, it still happens. Hopefully not that much, but it can. And it shouldn't. We also all know that some languages have super long words, like German, for example. There needs to be space for that. And also, there are languages that have different language standards, like the space in front of punctuation for the French. And all these kind of things, they need to be possible and adjustable in your game. Concatenation it's just pure evil. Do not ever combine different strings and then believe that they create something new that just works everywhere. It will not. Every language has different grammar rules that can affect the word order. If you have concatenated strings, the translators will not be able to see where these strings are being used, how they will be combined, so they have no way of verifying whether it works for them. And even if they do, they have no way to influence it. So it just doesn't work. Then obviously, double byte, right to left languages, all these kind of things, they are super important. And if you look at it, they make a lot of sense, but they are not always followed. So from your previous projects, you will know the level of knowledge of your development team. But there's always going to be new people, and knowledge sharing is super important. Maik already said that. Like, the games just exist for a long period of time, and you cannot trust that the development team will share everything they know with new colleagues. So make it your responsibility and be involved in writing guidelines and things like that. And repeat everything that's important. Every little thing, even if you haven't had any issues with it before. Let's say you never had a hard-coded string in your game. Just don't believe that just because it never happened before, it will never happen in the future. One day it may pop up, you haven't had it in your guidelines, and ultimately it's a mistake that could have been prevented. And last but not least, be involved in the planning. Make sure that you know that your team can handle, like what your team can handle, and also what a realistic timeline looks like. Don't wait until someone tells you the deadline, just so that you then realize that it's crazy and quite impossible and I can't do that by tomorrow. Make sure you communicate beforehand what your requirements are, and also make clear which impact a change in a schedule will have. Because that saves you in the long term, because you made your point clear, and you can refer to that later on if things don't work out. On the next slide now, we look at being in charge. So now you understand how the development team works. They know what you need from them, and you know what they expect from you. And that's great, but be careful not to be too accommodating to them. Like, own your process. Sticking to all the guidelines and the best practices can be quite a change for the team. And when things get a little stressful, the developers might try to get around the process and they squeeze in little things and pieces but here and there. And it's perfectly fine to find compromises. But again, you work together and have a common goal. So there's a difference between a compromise and not following a process. If you've done your homework and you have a solid project management in place, you're aware of potential risks, and also, most importantly, you know why you designed your process in a certain way. You have informed and educated everyone on it, so they should know what they're doing. Then there really shouldn't be a reason to ditch process in the middle of a project. But also, ownership does not mean that it's set in stone. Be open to feedback from all sides and reassess regularly, not only on your own, but together with all the stakeholders. Do postmortem analysis after project, because learning what you did wrong and how you can make it better, that's the only way you can grow and level up. But since there was 0% of you that think that their process is perfect, I'm very confident that you're good in that area, questioning and reassessing yourself. You also need to make sure that you work with the right people. The people you work with in terms of translation resources, so your translators internally or externally, freelancers, LSPs, whoever it might be, they need to know your product. They need to deliver quality and they need to be reliable. And in order to do all that and be all that, it's your responsibility to train them and keep them up to date. So you need to spend a lot of time preparing your loc kit that you can send out before the project, and then also obviously update continuously as the product stays alive. So send them your glossaries, your language style guides, storylines of the game, character guides, screenshots, whatever you might have. And also, most importantly, if they do not have it yet, pre-existing translations and your translation memories. Because there is so much content that may have been created over years and years of time, and it's important that it stays consistent. And if possible, ideally, give them access to playable builds. Even if it's products that are not out there yet, find ways to provide them with as much context, but also with the feel of the game. They need to know the gameplay. They need to play through it themselves to really understand what they're working on and what they need to bring across in their translation. Because if they do not know what their source is all about, they'll never be able to do a quality job. And that has nothing to do with the skill of a translator. That's just purely on you, as in the localization department that has responsibility for quality. Providing all that information, it sounds like it's a huge job, and it definitely can, because there can be a lot of documents and a lot of content that needs to be shared. But it's important. And if you have the right tools to support your job, it's absolutely manageable. And your loc kit then can grow as the game lives on. So specifically with the games as a service model, you will now face the challenge of providing continuous localization services, because it goes on and on and on. So it means more content, little bits and pieces, shorter turnaround times, a lot of different types of copy, marketing assets, in-game events, monetization, and so on. Everything that Maik already explained us at the beginning just creates a lot of content. So your challenges here will not only be scalability of your operations, but also to some extent the unpredictability. To support a live game, the product and the supporting functions need to react to the market and the product lifecycle, which means you cannot expect very long planning periods for any of this, and you need to be a bit more reactive in many areas, which also means you need to be proactive in all the areas where you can. So you need to be, you need to build on everything that we just talked about, and basically make your life as easy as possible. So try to think about this like as a whole new service basically that you provide. Think a little bit outside the box for some of the challenges you have, and just find new ways that work, which again can be very diverse for everyone. So as a first step, remove anything that's unnecessary, like any unnecessary step in your process, and then automate your workflows. You do not want to waste time with manual steps. You have probably limited human resources, and they're expensive, and they should not be spending time sending documents via email, manually calculating word counts, and check supplier invoices based on crazy spreadsheets. You want your process to be fast, easy, precise, by the push of a button. Maybe that also means that you have to review a little bit how you work and also who you work with, and review your supplier agreements. Because especially when we talk about invoicing and working with LSBs, the continuous efforts can be quite difficult to manage right at the beginning, because it's something new in your work relationship. So if your workload is more or less steady, for example, you might consider monthly fees instead of invoices based on project or word count, but you certainly want to be careful with any penalties, express charges, minimum charges, because you may have just a few words every day, but they add up to a large sum. So you cannot pay daily minimum fees. But also be mindful of your suppliers' needs, because what you ask from them again might be quite hard to accommodate. But they are your partner, so talk to them and find out how to solve it, because you want to have a strong partner that will be there when you desperately need them. So also be as transparent as you can, so that they understand your need, and if they don't, maybe look look around who else can help you. Maybe you also need to differentiate the service levels for the different types of content or certain types of requests. What you do on the initial game maybe is not applicable to daily updates. Maybe you also need different resources or other teams to help out. So look at look outside the box. Like, which native speaking resources do you, for example, have in a company that you could work with? Have a look at your marketing teams, your live ops teams, support. All those are people that know the products really well, and for some of them, it might actually also be a nice development opportunity to start helping out with these daily requests. And that can be, it can sound a little daunting, all of a sudden having different people mingle with your holy grail, so to speak. But if you work in a collaborative environment and you have tools that allow to crowdsource translations amongst approved resources, obviously, but also possibly already integrated to third-party tools that your marketing team might use or things like that, then you can still ensure consistency and quality, and you still keep the control. So yeah, don't be scared of doing things different, of changing the way you look at your day-to-day, just so that you can stay flexible and then ultimately create a solid process and a good product. So we now have a couple minutes for Maik to show us how that actually can look in a tool, so to speak, in Wordbee, the tool, let's say, that we look at today. Over to you, Maik.
Okay, I will make this quick so we have some time for questions in the end about the webinar. So as Aline already said, it's very important to have the right tools and that are kind of collaborative. And as we mentioned, like we want to have we want to give the translators as much context as they need. So of course, one of the biggest tools that we need is a translation memory, especially if we talk about gaming. So I have a little monster terminology here, for instance, and we can see that we can give descriptions of the monster. That's great. It's the cookie monster, and additional information like what it is, the character in a game can be a monster, where did we get our sources from, and even add some keywords and tags so that we can look for the different monsters in our terminology. Of course, this context information is not only for management's sake and to see like how we can manage all the information, but also needs to be accessible for the translators. So if you use a central tool, like a central translation management system with all the different modules attached, you can also have the information from your terminology database displayed in the in the CAT tool that ultimately the translator is working in. So you can get all the information, like with all the definitions and the picture for the translator, so the translator has a lot of context to work with. Also, when we look at gaming, we also sometimes have dialogues or different meta information that is important to translate text. So we also want to have this meta information included. For instance, when we have names like Jamie, we want to know, is this a male or female Jamie? Because in Spanish, it makes a huge difference when we use adjectives, for instance. And we also need to know who is speaking in the translation, so we can also accommodate for the different grammatical structures. And all this meta information, of course, can be drawn from those files. Other context can also be given by inserting images, for instance, or links, where translators can see the different characters that they see in the game, maybe also see the game environment they're currently in, so they get a feel for everything. And maybe also give some context about the marketing so they can directly see what kind of changes might have to be applied for the different languages. Next thing is, of course, the project management that needs to be up to date with all the different translation jobs that need to be followed up and sent to the different suppliers and basically be tracked in real time. Then, of course, that's what Aline already said, is like the different management. We have to take care of invoices, ideally have a tool that automatically creates invoices based on word counts and supplier prices, so we can directly manage our financials for each game within the same tool that we're actually translating and working with. And of course, have the analytics ready for that to see like what are our top performing linguists and project managers, what kind of text they're specialized in, how many volume they can do per day, their activity, and also if they stick to deadlines or not. So this is all data that can be centrally managed in a tool. And if that tool is then also integrated with different third-party tools, then it gives you a single source of truth for your localization process. So with this quick overview, I would like to give the stage to our moderators and for the questions that you had.
Yep, thank you. Thank you so much, Mike. So I had one question here about context. So, one person saying they'd be really interested how, the game lock department provides context to linguists for specific strings, because they're usually only given access to the game overall. But I think, quite honestly, that the demo you just provided answers that perfectly. So unless I hear again, I think that one you got to ahead of time. And then we got one question here. Okay, go ahead. Is there more you want to add?
If I can say something to that, I mean, you can add context information during the development phase, of course. Like if the developer is basically providing all the information, or maybe the scripting tool is giving you all the information in an exchange format like XML or CSV, you can of course draw this information directly from the source file. And when you prepare the different parts of the localization process in a way that you like insert those information right away, you can always draw on them then later on in the localization process.
Cool, thank you. Then we have one request sort of for a little bit more elaboration on your workflow automation. So for instance, how do you feed your files into the tool that you are presenting?
So there are different ways how to get content into your tool. So of course you can go with a manual import if like a full automation is not feasible because like you don't have the content or the amount of necessary for that would basically justify like a huge development with APIs or middlewares. You can just like import them, of course, manually and then just handle them in that way. More interestingly, of course, is that you can get content from different content sources, like from different content management systems, from document management systems and different games and game engines directly into your translation environment via APIs or hot folder integrations, for instance. So there are different ways how to automatically get like push content back and forth, so that you basically only have to select the content in your source in your source software. Then it will be pushed to your translation to your translation tool. Then the whole workflow will start, and as soon as it's finished, the source content with the languages will be sent back to the original third-party tool, which will then import it to the databases and put the text and the translations to the right place.
Great, thank you so much for that. Then we have one follow-up question on, you mentioned a concept of diverse copy. Could you explain what that is?
Yeah, so what we mean with that is basically all the different types of content that need to be translated. So you do not only have your in-game strings and your in-game content, but you have additional materials for marketing, for example, of your social media. So if you post anything on Facebook, for example, it needs to be localized. You have events on a daily basis, mostly, where it's a very different type of content that needs to be localized, because you also need to engage differently with players. It's not translating dialogues or a storyline or UI. It's marketing copy, really, and that comes in many shapes and forms, and also sometimes creates the need for a little bit of a different skill or mindset, really, when you start localizing it.
Thank you. We have one question here asking about planning. So you mentioned that that you start with a starter plan for the initial game launch, and then perhaps there's another plan for the continuous release. Now, how do you approach that planning process, and how do you get your stakeholders on board with these two very different plans?
Yeah, that can be definitely tricky. It always obviously depends on how the team is set up and who you interact with. But for the initial game, it's very important to just understand how everyone works in terms of getting your stakeholders on board. They need to understand what they need to provide to you so that you can do a good job, and you need to make them understand how you can be useful. So you're not just the ones translating, you're doing a lot more. So often with a localization, they a little bit like, oh yeah, we're the translators, but they're not really. They're a lot more. So for that planning, really you need to make sure that you are involved at an early stage so that you get information, and can also make adjustments. So really the key here is to be involved in the process and in meetings. And then it is helpful for the continuous part to just see it as a different process, because you might also interact with different teams. Now you're interacting with marketing and with live ops. You have more content in smaller pieces, so you need to do the same process a lot more often. It needs to be faster and repeatable. So there you have just like a whole different base for your planning on your process management. So from my experience, it often helps to just separate it, so also that the live content, so to speak, and the in-game content for new games, that they don't compete with the same resources.
Cool. Thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry. Also in terms of onboarding other people, of course, like we're working in linguistic departments, and of course, like language and like those finesse in linguistic little details is very important to us, which of course for other people maybe in business or management is not. So for those onboarding processes, it's of course always good to have a plan to also calculate the return of investment that the new process will deliver to the company. And in that way, you always get new alliances in places that you would have never expected.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Exactly. You need to talk their language really, and don't just talk about quality. Give quality a number. Like, what does it cost, and what do you earn with it?
Yeah. Yeah. We got one question, and that will be our final one, but I think it's good for closing. For this question comes from a student, do you have any tips for students who've just graduated from an audiovisual translation MA and that want to work in video game localization but have no experience? Essentially, how do you break in?
Getting the start can sometimes be difficult, but a good way in for many is as a game tester, because there is a lot more need for testers than there is for people in localization specifically. So a lot of people choose that way, but also, to be honest, a master's in audiovisual localization and translation is already a really good base, because there aren't too many of these programs actually that also prepare you specifically for audiovisual translation. So really build on that and start building connections. The gaming industry is super small. Everybody knows each other. So start reaching out to people and build your network. Mm-hmm. And maybe try it as a tester.
Yeah. Mike, anything you want to add?
Well, personally, like I came from university and started in a translation agency, and that also proved very, very was also very successful, because like if you start as a freelancer or just a translator, let's say, of course, like you work for yourself, but you cannot really not really gain experience from others. And there are so many people out there who have knowledge to share, and that know processes and can show you things that you would never even have imagined from your university.
Yeah.
So also trying to find someone who can also mentor you, and especially in those companies when there is someone who can really show you around and show you the first little tricks, so that you can get a more holistic view, that is very helpful.
Yeah, thank you. That is all the time we have today. Thank you so much, Aline and Mike, for that expert view on gaming as a service. And another big thank you to Wordbee for sponsoring our webinar today, and to all of our audience members for joining and for asking so many questions. We would appreciate it if you could take just a minute to give us your feedback on this session today using the post-event survey that will pop right up after I close. It's short, but your input helps us to refine our webinar program. And with that, I wish Aline and Mike a good evening in Germany, and many of you a good day, depending on where you are. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.